Pierre Totem Locomotor.
Today's subject is a woman who's poised to define British theatre, whose sharp intelligence shaped some of cinema's most unforgettable characters, and whose face has become a symbol of excellence from the West End to Hollywood. Maggie Smith. She was the actress who could steal a scene with a single glance, the legend who turned the prime of Miss Jean Brodie into an Oscar-winning triumph, who charmed global audiences as Professor McGonagall in the Harry Potter saga, and who delivered razor-sharp wit as the Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey. But behind the standing ovations, 2 Academy Awards, and decades of sold-out performances, Maggie Smith's life was never just perfect scripts and glowing reviews. She weathered a marriage that crumbled under the weight of fame, endured tabloid whispers about her fierce temperament, and fought a brutal battle with cancer while cameras rolled, refusing to step away even when the cost was immense. She faced an industry that often doubted women past a certain age and answered every doubt with another iconic role. She wasn't perfect. She endured heartbreak, loss, and the relentless scrutiny that comes with being a legend. But to those who know her story, Maggie Smith is far more than her titles and trophies. She is a woman who built a life beyond the spotlight while raising children who grew up in the shadow and glow of her towering legacy. This is the story of Dame Maggie Smith, and what became of the children of a woman the world calls one of the greatest actresses of all time. Chris Larkin was born in June 1967, the first child of 2 towering figures in British theatre, Dame Maggie Smith and Sir Robert Stephens. From the moment he entered the world, he was surrounded by scripts, stage lights, and the erratic rhythms of an actor's life. But for young Chris, fame wasn't glitter. It was noise. It was arguments in the next room while his mother was preparing lines for her next role. It was the camera flashes at the stage door and the uncomfortable silence that followed headlines about his parents' failing marriage. He witnessed firsthand what it meant to be a working artist in Britain. The discipline, the acclaim, the emotional cost. His mother was winning awards for the prime of Miss Jean Brodie. His father was electrifying audiences at the National Theatre. But behind the curtain, their relationship was fraying. As Chris grew into adolescence, the weight of 2 famous parents began to press on him. Not with pressure to succeed, but with the silent question, did he even want this life? His parents divorced in 1975, and by then, Chris was already beginning to understand that celebrity wasn't shelter. It was exposure. In school, he was bright but quiet. Teachers knew who his parents were, and so did his classmates, and that recognition created a tension. Admiration tinged with expectation. When he began dabbling in drama himself, people noticed. He had presence, but more than that, he had control. Like his mother, his delivery was sharp and precise. Like his father, he could shift emotional gears mid-scene. But unlike either of them, Chris wanted something different. When it came time to step into the professional world, he made a decision that would define the shape of his career. He would not use the Stephens name. Instead, he adopted Chris Larkin, a quiet tribute to poet Philip Larkin, and a deliberate step away from the legacy he was born into. It wasn't rebellion, it was preservation. He wanted to earn his roles, not inherit them. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Chris carved out a modest but deeply respected place in British film and television. He played roles in Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World alongside Russell Crowe, and in Valkyrie with Tom Cruise. But he never chased stardom. His choices were careful, often complex, supporting characters that required restraint rather than bravado. He appeared in period dramas, wartime films, and literary adaptations, genres where technique mattered more than celebrity. All the while, interviewers continued to circle the inevitable question, what's it like having Dame Maggie Smith as your mother? Chris answered with dignity, never leveraging her name for attention, never denying the influence. He understood that his mother's life, her triumphs, her very public health struggles, Even her perceived aloofness in the media were part of his story, whether he embraced them or not. What many didn't see was the quiet relationship that continued between mother and son, one built on shared professionalism, deep mutual respect, and an understanding that fame was neither curse nor gift, but a condition to be managed. When Maggie Smith battled cancer in the late 2000s while still filming Harry Potter, Chris kept his distance from the tabloids but stayed present in her life. He didn't speak publicly, but insiders knew he was watching closely, quietly supportive. Unlike other celebrity children drawn into scandal or spectacle, Chris stayed the course. His drama lived on the stage, not in headlines. Today, Chris Larkin remains a steady figure in the world of British performance. Not a superstar, not a recluse, but a craftsman. He has acted in BBC dramas, performed on stage in regional theaters, and built a life defined not by who his parents were, but by what he made of their example. His story isn't one of rebellion or imitation. It's a life quietly shaped by legacy, aware of its power, cautious of its reach, and determined always to define it on his own terms. Toby Stevens was born in April 1969, the second son of Maggie Smith and Robert Stevens. And from his earliest memories, the theater wasn't just a profession, it was the air his family breathed. While his mother was already recognized as one of Britain's most electrifying actresses, and his father was a magnetic leading man of the stage, the household Toby grew up in was far from glamorous. It was a world of rehearsals running late into the night, of parents shifting between tenderness and conflict, and of a young boy learning that applause could echo in a living room one day and arguments could shake the same walls the next. When Maggie and Robert's marriage began to splinter, Toby was still a child watching adults carry the strain of fame and ambition into private spaces. Their divorce in 1975 left him and his brother Chris navigating two homes, two artistic temperaments, and a press that occasionally treated their family life as public entertainment. Those early years were formative. Toby saw brilliance up close, but he also saw its cost, and he would carry both lessons into his own path. In school, Toby was energetic and restless, often using performance as an outlet. Teachers noticed his charisma, and classmates quickly realized he could take over a room with a gesture or a joke. Yet there was always an unspoken comparison hanging over him. The sense that, as Maggie Smith's son, he was expected to be extraordinary. Toby didn't shy away from acting. Instead, he embraced it, throwing himself into drama studies at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art. Even as a student, he was aware that his surname opened certain doors and closed others, and like his brother, he wrestled with how much of his parents' legacy should define him. But unlike Chris, Toby decided not to change his name. He kept Stevens and met the comparisons head-on, determined to prove he could match or even surpass the expectations. Those early training years were intense. He immersed himself in Shakespeare, learned to wield both classical technique and modern vulnerability, and developed a reputation for bold choices in roles that others found intimidating. By the late 1990s, Toby's career was taking shape with impressive speed. He won acclaim on stage with the Royal Shakespeare Company, earning praise for his work in Coriolanus and Hamlet, roles that demanded emotional range and physical endurance. His performances had critics noting shades of both his parents, the steely focus of Maggie Smith, the daring energy of Robert Stevens. Yet even as accolades came in, Toby spoke openly about the pressure of growing up in their shadow, recalling how casting directors would mention his mother in auditions and how reviewers would inevitably frame his achievements in the context of his family. That scrutiny reached a new height when he crossed into international film. In 2002, at just 33, Toby was cast as Gustav Graves, the suave yet sinister villain opposite Pierce Brosnan in the James Bond film Die Another Day. The role catapulted him onto a global stage, and with it came the tabloids, the red carpets, and the double-edged sword of instant recognition. Some headlines called him Maggie Smith's son takes on Bond, as though his identity was still tied to hers. But Toby used the attention to expand his opportunities rather than retreat from them. Behind the scenes, the lessons from his mother's career were clear. Longevity mattered more than hype, and talent had to outlast gossip. He watched how she endured personal dramas, The dissection of her private life, her battle with cancer years later, and how she never allowed them to eclipse her work. Toby applied that same resilience when his own career ebbed and flowed. After Another Day, he balanced television work with theater, choosing projects that challenged him rather than just padded his resume. He starred in adaptations like Jane Eyre, playing a brooding yet layered Rochester, and took daring turns in stage productions that critics hailed as risky but inspired. In interviews, he often described Maggie Smith not as a mythic figure, but as a working actor who showed up prepared, focused, and unshaken by the noise. That image of her shaped his own approach. Even when his personal life made headlines, he stayed grounded, crediting his mother's example. The 2010s brought Toby a defining role in the Starz series Black Sails, where he played the ruthless yet haunted Captain Flint. Week after week, audiences around the world watched him lead with ferocity, and longtime theatergoers saw the same intensity they'd admired in his earlier work. Again, the shadow of Maggie Smith was there in interviews. But by this point, Toby had carved out his own legacy, proving that talent can stand on its own even when born in the glow of someone else's spotlight. Throughout these years, he also balanced family life, marrying actress Anna Louise Plowman and raising their children. A quieter chapter that echoed his mother's ability to separate work from home. Now in his mid-50s, Toby Stephens remains a dynamic force, shifting easily between screen and stage, unafraid of villain roles, period dramas, or modern thrillers. He speaks of his mother with admiration, acknowledging that her career was both a compass and a challenge, a reminder that greatness demands discipline, and that drama, both on stage and off, is something you survive, not something you chase. Toby's life is a testament to that balance. A boy who grew up in the turbulence of two famous parents, a man who weathered comparisons and public scrutiny, and an actor who forged a path that is entirely his own while still carrying the unmistakable imprint of Maggie Smith's artistry and resilience. 2 children. Each lived a different version of what it meant to be a child of Maggie Smith, not just by birth, but by the burden and privilege of growing up in the shadow of a legend. Their mother gave the world unforgettable performances. They gave her something quieter, resilience, loyalty, and a future for the craft she devoted her life to. If you found this story meaningful and want more deep dives into the hidden lives behind some of the world's most celebrated artists, subscribe to Legacy Uncovered. Your support helps bring the untold side of fame into focus. Thanks for listening.